Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, a show celebrating and questioning one of the most beloved entertainment companies in the world through honest, passionate, and clear-eyed Disney discussions. I'm Jeff DePauli, your entertainment-obsessed host with rose-colored glasses removed. Today in the show, I'll be chatting with Garner Holt from Garner Holt Productions. Most likely, you've seen old episodes of the Disneyland television series where Walt and his Imagineers were building the first ever audio-animatronic figures like the Enchanted Tiki Room birds, President Lincoln, pirates, and many more. And that's how it used to work. You see, nobody was building animatronics at that time, so the Walt Disney Company and the folks at WED Enterprises had to do it for themselves. I think a lot of people still believe the animatronic figures we see in new attractions are still being made at Walt Disney Imagineering. But that's rarely the case these days. Enter Garner Holt, who has been creating the greatest animatronics in the world since 1977, and has been building them for Disney for several decades. Whether it's small animated figures on parade floats, a giant Maleficent Dragon, or anything in between, there's a good chance that Garner Holt Productions had their hands in the project. Listen as Garner shares the story of how a visit to Disneyland's Haunted Mansion changed the trajectory of his life, and how he later got to play in that exact sandbox with the creation of Haunted Mansion Holiday. After a private tour of Garner Holt Productions facilities in Redlands, California, I sat down with Garner for the conversation you are about to hear. Enjoy!
Prepare for some insight. You've tuned in to an exclusive DCTC interview.
Garner, thank you so much for having me at your production facility. It is quite magnificent, and you were kind enough to take me on a full circle tour of the whole process, which is amazing, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure having you. We appreciate rabid Disney fans, and we like to have people out here that enjoy what we do.
I have a feeling that many Disney nerds have been through this building, including yourselves.
There have been quite a few, and we're probably among them, yes.
Yeah. Now, before we hop into the work that you specifically did, I want to talk just a little bit about the history of animatronic figures, specifically with Disney. And true or false, is Walt Disney the first company to create animatronic figures?
Well, there were, you can go back hundreds of years back to, even in, in the early days in the Romans and Greeks and that, people making, what really we referred to later as automatons. And they were characters that, that looked like they were alive, ducks and crazy things that they would make, animals and things. And people have always been fascinated with the illusion of life, something that looks alive. And, the bell ringers like in the big churches, and a lot of the automatons back in the 1600s and 1700s. So really until the turn of the century in the 1900s, we really didn't have anything that was really considered animatronic. I mean, when electronics started to happen in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and electrical things, people started to use motors and things to try to make figures move. And there was early robots. They were kind of the Tin Man looking thing, and kind of hokey looking. But really, animatronics, really audio animatronics that was penned by the Walt Disney Company, the concept was really, and really maybe the first Lincoln was, and the Tiki Birds were really the first time that, electronics and audio signals were used to program a character to perform, other figures early with Disney, like in the Jungle Cruise and that, had been operated by cams. And that's rotating discs that have notches in them that trigger movement. And that's really not audio animatronics. Animatronics is really using electronic control systems to control movements and audio and that type of thing and combine it all into a character that's programmed and looks like it's alive. And they really, with the first Lincoln, that was the first real, true, decent human animatronic figure that was ever built,
Now you hit upon some stuff that I really wanted to talk about because there are some different terminology. There's Audio-Animatronic, which I believe is a registered trademark of Disney, right?
That's correct.
And then there's animatronic, which is kind of the more general term.
Mm-hmm.
And did the word animatronic exist before audio-animatronic?
No.
Okay.
It really started out as audio-animatronic, and then people just started shortening it to animatronic. And, but as you say, Disney has patented or trademarked the audio-animatronic word, and but they don't control the word animatronic or animatronics.
Interesting. Okay. And then something like the Jungle Cruise, where it's not an animatronic figure. It's a much simpler...
Well, now they are, but in the beginning
they're
they were just
animatronics.
cams and, old cam systems, would control the movements just kind of, and some of them are random, and, it was kind of but they didn't have the technology back then in the 50s when they opened Disneyland.
Okay, so even the animals with simple movements like, raise a trunk and that's all it does, that's still an animatronic figure.
Well, it is now because it's using, electronics and, and control systems that are programmed to run it. So, yeah, it would be considered now. But back in the day, when they had just one or two moves and they were on cams, they were kind of pseudo-animatronics.
Do you remember the first time that you witnessed an animatronic figure? Because it obviously made a really big impression on you.
Oh, it was huge. My very first trip to Disneyland, I don't remember because I was only about 2 years old. And, after that, I watched, I was a big fan of the TV shows, the Munsters, and I watched all the monster movies, with Boris Karloff and Frankenstein, all that. And I was fascinated by that. And I had a little haunted house in my backyard, and I was going through the house one summer afternoon, and there was something on the World of Color on TV about Disney, and that said something about their haunted mansion. And I just went nuts because I'd never seen this. And it's like, and then they showed the Osmonds going through it and showed how they were building different mechanical things for it, which were some of the animatronics. And I saw that and I just freaked out. I ran to my parents' room and asked them, I said, I begged them to take me to Disneyland. And they did. And I told them on the way home, I said, Mom and Dad, I said, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I said, I'm going to build haunted mansions. I'm going to build rides. I'm going to build this. And they're like, yeah, sure you are. So I basically went home and I set up a card table in the garage and I started working on what I thought were animatronics, little door hinges and pieces of wood and string and stuff like that. And that was the beginning of Garner Holt Productions.
That's really, wow, that's amazing to think that your first impression was a Disney park, and we'll get into how you ended up in Haunted Mansion Holiday, the very thing that inspired you and all that, but that's just wild. That's like, I don't know, pinch yourself kind of moments.
Right after I heard about it, even before I'd been there, my mom, the store called Kmart, we went to Kmart, and I was looking in the record section, and lo and behold, coincidentally, there was this record of the Haunted Mansion. And so I rushed up, and my mom bought me the record, and I went home and I practically memorized it. And I took it, I was in 4th grade, I believe. I took it to my classroom, and for Halloween, we turned out all the lights, and I recited played the parts, up at the front of the classroom. And I was so enamored with the Haunted Mansion, but it was at a time that I hadn't even been there. I mean, I loved the Haunted Mansion. I hadn't even been there. And so I was hooked, when I saw it, I just about come unglued,
Well, that was the brilliance of like the Disneyland and World of Color TV show, right? Like I know this was even beyond Walt's time, but they were just the best infomercials ever still are. And,
brilliant. Yeah.
And, did you grow up around here or no? Did you grow up in Southern California?
Oh, yeah. No, I grew up 10 minutes from where we're sitting right now.
Okay. So you were lucky enough to have that access to Disneyland. But sure. I mean, so many people watching that on TV, that was their only access perhaps ever. Yet they all felt like they still had a piece of Disneyland in their life.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And yeah, Walt was brilliant. That was a brilliant thing. It was like a commercial he was getting paid for to advertise his park.
Yeah.
And, so I just had to go there.
That's amazing. You're tinkering around in your garage. Fast forward a bunch of years. You launch your business in 1977. And what kind of training did you have to prepare for what you ended up? I mean, we're in a massive building right now. We just walked through a ton of different rooms with the whole production process. How do you get from 1977, I'm sure it was a lot smaller, to where you are today? Like, where did the training come from?
Well, I tell people I started in the garage with one table, and then it grew to a few tables, took over the garage. It just kept growing and growing, and now I've got about 1,000 tables. But no, the fun thing about it is that I don't have any real formal education in anything. I basically I tested out of high school. I started my business, and I wanted to do my business so bad. I wanted to get out of high school. So back in the day, back in the 70s, I don't think they do it anymore, but you could, in your junior year, you could test out of high school and skip your senior year. Huh. So I never even went to my senior year. I'm the only education I have is up through my junior year of high school. Wow. I never went to college, never went, totally, because I just focused on the business. And so it's like, I'm just going to do this business, and was determined to make it work, Now,
did you just feel like you innately have a business mind, or was that something? Because obviously you're naturally creative, but was the business a really hard thing for you to learn?
Well, it's really kind of strange because I didn't know anything about business. I mean, I was a 17-year-old kid when I started. I knew nothing about business, and I'm not. People say, "Oh, you must be a great artist." I'm not a good artist. I mean, if I draw something on paper, you'd be surprised at how not a good artist. I'm mechanically inclined. I used to take televisions apart and things like that. And, I enjoyed, I excelled in my high school in all my shop classes. Okay. Wood shop, metal shop, welding, drafting, print shop, auto shop. I loved all that. I struggled in everything else because I couldn't figure out what problems of democracy had to do with animatronics, so I didn't care about it. But the shop classes really are what gave me the grounding for moving forward and working with my hands to be able to build things, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but we have an education program now where we bring hundreds of kids in here, and we also work with schools to bring back shop classes, which don't exist in a lot of schools now. It's called Garner Holt Education Through Imagination. And we bring things like what we call animaker spaces into schools. And really, it's a modern day shop class. And because I want kids to have shop classes. And so we've got dozens of them out there now, and we're spreading them all over the country.
That's amazing. We will definitely touch more on that later. A lot of the people that work for you, where does their training come? Like, there's no school out there teaching people to build audio animatronic figures, as far as I know. So are these like car people, or, what kind of training does your staff have?
Well, I've got a lot of staff that have been here a long time, and, we do a lot of, animatronics is... The best animatronics come from a lot of experience. It's kind of like, and anything that would take a lot of years and years of experience to like hone your craft. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, nowadays it's different. In the very beginning, 30 years ago, I'd try to find people that knew kind of broadly what it is we did. And there was very few of those people. And it was almost impossible. But now we more specialized. Like I'll bring in a high quality machinist or a very talented engineer, let's say a PE, or somebody that's really got a degree in electrical engineering and stuff. So we're more focused on the different departments now, or a real high end costumer, let's say. So it's more specific to the different departments, but the early days when it was just, for the first 10 years of the business, it was just me.
Wow.
And I practically slept in the shop. I practically lived there because I needed a place to stay. I didn't have enough money to have employees. So a lot of my friends would come over at night and just help, and I'd give them pizza. That's, that was the reward for helping, I guess. And, but I kept the business going and paid the rent and paid the electric and squeaked by for about 10 years, and then started out with one employee, and then 2 employees, and 3 employees. And
at that point, those first 10 years where, you're really just trying to make ends meet, Who are your clients at that point?
There's a lot of tangents to a lot of stories that get into how the business kind of evolved. And I happened to finagle my way into my first theme park job, which was the theme park doesn't exist anymore. It was a small theme park in Vegas. It was at the MGM Grand Hotel. They had a little theme park there, and they had a bunch of rides and things. And we built all the animation for one of the rides. So when I first got that job, I landed the job. I talked my way into it, and when I literally signed the contract, I had no employees. I had never worked at a theme park job in my life. I had never built figures for professional purposes before. And I just, it's like, get the job and then figure, it's like going out and building a house. You've never nailed a nail in your life. And then after you get the job, you got to figure out how to build a house.
I love that, though. That's awesome.
My employees said to me one time, they said, Garner, they said, you're the kind of person that will run and jump in a pool and then decide on the way down if there's any water in the pool.
Yeah.
And
thank God there are people like that, right? Or else the world would be so much more boring.
Well, back in the day, when Walt was sitting in a room, when Walt walked into a room and Walt said, we're going to build a giant mountain in the middle of Anaheim, and it's going to have snow on it, and there's going to be bobsleds coming down it, and blah, blah, blah. None of those people dared look at him and said, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do that. They all just nodded their heads and said, yes, sir, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And they did. And, that's kind of the attitude that Disney had. And that's kind of the attitude I enjoy. It's like people throw stuff at us and we just say, yeah, okay, we can do anything. If you have enough time and enough money, we can do anything.
Yeah. Now, what was the first project that you worked on for Disney?
Well, we started tinkering with some store display type stuff and parade stuff.
For Disney stores or for stores in the park?
Just little stores in the park.
Okay.
And then some Disney, they came to us and started with some Disney figures for the parade floats. So we started doing, we worked on Mulan Parade and Lion King Parade and Parade of Dreams.
Did you create those Papatronics for the Lion King Parade?
We did some for the Lion King.
Oh, that was a great parade.
We did. We even did some float stuff for the electrical parade. But we did a lot we did some Mulan stuff, and we did the Parade of Dreams is a big one. We had a bunch of big characters in there, like the Lumiere and Mrs. Potts and the big caterpillar and the birds and the crab, from under the sea and all that stuff. But beautiful figures, and everybody took notice. Really, the Disney thing started out. What happened with Disney is it started out like almost nothing, and then we did something and did a good job, and then it would double, and then we did a good job, and then it would double, and then we did a good job, and then it would double, and pretty soon we're doing a simple character, and then they're like, wow, this is great, and you get a good price, and then. Okay, we'll try this. And then we did that and then did this and that, and all the way up to where we're doing the top end stuff.
Now, originally, back when Walt was around, they were doing all of that stuff themselves at Imagineering. And I've heard it's because there was nobody else doing it, really. Like, they had to do it themselves.
Yeah, sure.
But at some point, they started outsourcing. Do you happen to know when that started?
Well, Disney has always outsourced from even the very beginning, even before they built the park. Most of the rides in the park, when the park opened, were Aero rides. Another company called Aero Development. They did like the little cars and this and that. And Disney did some things internally at the studio, but they didn't have really WED at the time. But so they really outsourced a lot of vehicles and various other ride vehicles and things to Aero. And then as they grew, they had more unique ideas, and people like Bob Gurr and others would develop things that nobody had, and rather than contract them, they said, okay, well, let's create this thing called or at the time WED Enterprises, and develop our own production, company. But having said that, really it was only, I think mostly it was only production out of necessity, because even lighting, let's say, or scenery, they do some scenery internally, but they'd farm some out to the studios, and then they would do lighting, let's say. There might be light fixtures and special effects fixtures that they need, and they're like, well, nobody makes these. So they made them themselves. And I've got tons of old stuff that has Disney's name on it, special effects stuff. But now other companies started making it, right? So fog machines, let's say, and this kind of machine, and this kind of lighting effect, this kind of lighting effect. And all of a sudden, Disney or anybody else, you kind of wake up one day, and I've gone through this, you wake up one day and it's like, wow, I'm making this, but somebody else is over here making it, and it's actually better than what I'm making. So heck with it. I mean, I don't want to be in the lighting business. Why do that? So you stop making it and you start buying it, right? It's a lot cheaper because you don't have all these employees. And so that's kind of how a lot of that happened. And that's kind of how it is nowadays. Even, it's kind of, what do you make it internally or do you buy it, which is easier,
Yeah, I think you're talking about them creating their lighting effects and stuff. One of the things to this day that I still think is so funny is the lighting effect in Haunted Mansion with the hand going across the clock. If you look behind you, I'm sure you've done it many times. It's like, it looks like
a motor with a GoPro on it.
Yeah.
A little thing coming around. Yeah.
Unbelievable. There's like nothing high tech. It's as old school as it was back in the day. So
yeah, but they had to build that back then because that's the effect they wanted, and nobody built anything like that. I mean, it's like you pretty much have to do it yourself,
Yeah. Now, for you, is it harder to create? Obviously, Disney comes to you with a lot of their classic characters and says, make an animatronic figure of that. Is it easier to do that or something like that's just a blank slate that you're starting from scratch? Like, is it really hard to say, make this exactly as it's seen on screen?
Well, we'll talk kind of generically. I mean, not just about Disney, but others. I mean, it's kind of, it's not really a secret that we have built a lot of figures in parks all over the world for various companies. And what you're talking about is, and we're very conscious of their wanting to keep things quiet, keep things secret, and that type of thing. But a lot of the stuff is really well known out in the internet, and people are aware of who does what, and people find that out. But what you're talking about is an IP, which is intellectual property, and we call them IP characters, So, I mean, whether it's Madagascar or, something from Blue Sky or something from Pixar or something from Disney or something from, any of the companies, they're very, very cautious and very critical about having somebody interpret those characters into a real life thing. Now, nowadays, it's a lot easier than it used to be because most everything is CG. And when it's CG, you have a three-dimensional representative on the screen of what that character is, so you can use that to mill the character. In the old days, some of the hardest characters that we've ever had to do were like Peanuts, because Peanuts was never 3D. Peanuts was always a 2D thing, just flat. You'd only see Snoopy front, side, or, at an angle. And when it came time to make them 3-dimension, they don't 3-dimension very well. They just look weird because you're not used to seeing them at different angles. And so we had to work really hard to show the company that we could kind of interpret those. But those companies are very protective of those. Those are like their children, and they have to have them exactly the way they need to be. And that's one of the things we specialize in is creating 3-dimensional animatronics that look exactly like the characters on the screen.
Yeah, because something that's so interesting about animatronic figures and even mascot characters in the parks is they can go from like amazing to creepy really like there's a very fine line, it feels like. And so I would imagine the testing that you must have some creepy nights here when the rooms are dark, I would assume.
Some of the things sometimes characters don't translate to anthropomorphic characters, to where there's a human in them. I think there's probably some characters out there that shouldn't have been made walk-arounds because you can't really take a person and adapt it to them. The legs are so long or this or that, or their heads or their necks are so long and skinny. And you just really can't pull it off, and it's like some of those things, I'm surprised that some of them do what they do. But anyhow, it's, they try to get as close as they possibly can. We usually nail it when it comes to the figures, the animatronics though.
Take me through the process real quickly. We just walked through the process, but just kind of beginning to end, because one thing that people may not know about you is, you really do the whole process. So what are those different steps and divisions?
Well, Disney's Marty Sklar, who worked with Walt, used to say that, everything starts on a blank piece of paper, and that's true. It's a challenge. You develop a character, you develop a scene, you develop an attraction. Attraction in a Disney park or any other park, I don't want to just use Disney, Universal, any others, there's three different, attraction is broken up into three different segments. There's the ride element, the facility element, and then the show element. We don't do ride. We don't do facility. We help design some of it, but we don't really build any of that. But we build the show part, which is the figures, the sets and scenery, the special effects, the lighting, sound, everything that goes into it.
The stuff that the guests notice, I guess, right? Because we're not thinking about rides, if it's doing it right.
They get in a vehicle and they don't know how it's doing what it's doing, but it's just getting them from one end of the ride to the other, right? And so the facility, they're not paying attention to the electric or the air conditioning or, or where they're walking or anything else. It's just, or how did they fit this building in the park? They're not worried about that. They're just going through it.
So if it were like a Broadway show, you do everything that we see on stage as an audience member.
Correct.
And everything that's backstage is kind of out of your hands.
Yeah, the facility or ride, So companies come to us all the time and say, well, they come to us a number of ways. We have clients that have come to us and said, we want animatronics and we want a show and we have no idea what we want. And we'll say, okay, well, give us a hint. Is it Vikings? Space? Is it, so sometimes they have no clue and we completely do it from scratch. And then, a lot of it's kind of a mix. And then sometimes companies come to us and say, we've designed a complete attraction. We know exactly what we want. We know exactly what figures. We know what color everything is down to the nut and bolt. Here's a stack of blueprints a foot thick. We just want you to build this. And we say, okay, and we just build it. So that kind of thing doesn't take a lot of thinking, but the fun ones are kind of the hybrids, or sometimes we like just going crazy and designing and developing an attraction or dark ride or something like that. So, really, in building a figure, if you boil it down to just a figure, it's usually a figure is part of a story. It's part of a group of characters that is part of a story and an attraction. And as you move through the attraction, the characters are the performers that you meet as you go along, usually characters that are, obviously pertinent to the story. They are IP characters a lot of the times. And as you are moving through and greeting these characters, the intent usually in an attraction is to have you become one of the performers. So you're part of the ride. You're immersed in this attraction and you are interacting with these characters. And they're kind of interacting with you, and you're the middle of this whole thing, and you're kind of becoming a part of this whole thing. You're becoming a part of the story in a way. So we build characters with the intention of having movements and things that apply to this, that work, to tell the scene, tell the story. So we start out with developing how they fit into a scene, how they do different movements, what movements they'll have. You got to reflect that with the budget and make sure that, characters affordable. You put all the hero characters up front and where people are focusing, and you put simple characters in the back, or a zebra in the back. Maybe all it's doing is moving its tail and its, its ears. But the character up front is very loud, vocal, and, so we start by sculpting that character and move through a plastic process, creating the skins and the shells and designing all the mechanical structures that go inside the figure's framework and all the motion. And that goes through animators that really put all the joints in the right place. And we build nervous systems, just like in a person, that carry all the electrical signals to the actuators. And the actuators are like muscles that make it move. And, you apply a voice to it later. You apply programming to it. You make it, perform the way you want it to perform using programming. Voice actors to act out the voice. Costuming is extremely important. The costumes have to look just like they look in the movies, and or the films or whatever. And all while you're doing this, it's usually directed by a art director or art directors who are very familiar with the property and putting the whole attraction together, whether they're a client or working internally for us, Lighting is set. Lighting is very good. It has to be perfect. Special effects, fire, sparkling, stars, whatever it is. Atmospheric effects, fog, rain, snow, whatever. How the ride works, how the whole thing's programmed together, and it becomes a show.
I'm going to assume in the case of Disney, you're usually getting a stack of... they're not coming to you with a blank page of, hey, come up with something. Like, they have a pretty good idea of what they want.
Yeah, usually.
So
most of the bigger parks do, like the Disney's Universals and Eftelings and Europa Park and stuff like that.
So in the case of something like that, are you actually programming the movements as well? Or is that something where, you deliver the complete figure that can move the way they want it to, but then they'll install it in the attraction and actually animate the thing themselves?
A lot of times they do that, but sometimes we do programming ourselves. It just depends on what the team is, what availability of staff is, what their budgets are. I mean, it all has to do with, it's all usually a unique, every project they're not all cookie cutter. They're all kind of different with different team members, and it just has to do with how somebody wants to run a job.
Let's talk about Haunted Mansion Holiday. You said that was the attraction that really got you into this industry and the desire to be part of it. So you get a call one day and they say, hey, we're going to tinker with the Haunted Mansion. Number one, how does that make you feel? And then number two, and they're like, and we want you to work with us on it.
It was surreal. It was surreal. It's like, here's the Haunted Mansion that sparked my interest in life's career. That I sat in my classroom and recited the record, and then here they're talking to me about building animatronics and sets and scenery and, elements to put in the Haunted Mansion to change it into a different show. And it was surreal. It was like very surprising, and it was kind of like, I had to pinch myself. It's kind of like, and then ultimately after it was done, I realized it's like, nobody to that point had ever put a high-end animatronic character into a classic Disney attraction that was an outsider from Disney. It was always Imagineering. You know what I mean? That was the first time that somebody put a classic a character into a classic Disney attraction. I'm like, wow, how did that happen? How was that me?
Were you familiar with Nightmare Before Christmas? Like, other than having just seen it, were you like a fan of Nightmare Before Christmas?
I hadn't even seen it.
You'd never seen it. Wow. Wow. Okay.
So I had to run out and see it real quick. But
what did you think of when you saw Jack? And they're like, you want us to make this tall, thin guy an audio-animatronic figure? Like,
it was kind of, but if you'd asked me, even before I saw it, the answer was yes.
Of course.
I mean, I'm going to say yes. It's like, I'll do anything. It's like, so yeah, it was a very interesting thing. And then later, when the Haunted Mansion Holiday was done, nobody ever knows what the public are going to think, right? I mean, if they did, we'd all be rich. We'd all have grade A movies, every one that came out, right? But the Haunted Mansion, so nobody knew the Haunted Mansion Holiday would be a hit. They thought maybe that would just be like a 1-year thing. They thought Fantasmic would be a 1-year thing. And then, look at it now. It's like, people can't live without it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a big deal. And so I was very pleased to see the reaction to it, the success of it. There's a lot of Disney purists that didn't like it, but they don't want anybody to touch anything in the park, or change anything, and it's like, okay, well, there's always going to be that. Can't make everybody happy, but most of the time, and my reaction was like, hey, look what it did to the mansion, because, we were going in there at night and queue lines were down to like, less than 5 minutes, and it's like, it revitalized the attraction. The queue lines went back up to hours long, and it was such a hit in California that Japan goes, well, wait a minute, we want that for our Haunted Mansion here in Japan. So, boom, a couple of years later, we're building that for, the show in Japan. And the queues there were 5 hours long.
Jeez. One of the cool things that I saw in your lobby was you have the Sally figure that you built for the attraction, but it's in a pose that I didn't recognize because the one that I know from Disneyland is, leaning on the tombstone, but it's actually the pose that you created for Tokyo.
Yeah, we have a few test figures around here that we've done that for when we were producing things. We test costumes and stuff like that on. So yeah, we have a couple of characters around that are kind of cool, and Sally does grace our lobby. But
it's never just cookie cutter, is my point. It's not like you just took the figure you made for Disneyland in California and shipped her out to Tokyo.
Yeah,
it's a different figure.
Oh yeah, no, you have to change it. Well, the mansion in Japan is actually the copy of the one in Florida. It's a lot, and that one's a lot different from out in California here. So there's a lot of different unique things to it, different characters, different numbers of characters and things. But
you mentioned Fantasmic, and we need to talk about one of my favorite things ever, and that is that beautiful Maleficent Dragon that was added to Fantasmic. What would it have been, 2009-ish? Something like that. It was part of Summer Night-tastic, whenever that was. And that thing is gorgeous and breathes fire spectacularly.
Thank you.
Is that one of those projects you get a call and you're like, I don't know if we can do this?
No. I said, no, okay.
I love it.
No.
Had you ever done anything that big?
So I'll tell you what, we didn't build the original dragon.
Yeah, because it was a crane, essentially.
But we spent a lot of time working on it. We made new heads for it several times, so we were kind of already working on the dragon a little bit, Then they said, okay, we want this new dragon. So we built it, and it is a beautiful piece, and it still entertains people. We saw, I saw it last night from a distance. It was a very difficult figure. It's had to be built on an elevator that would drop it into the ground, and it actually collapses into itself because the figure itself kind of telescopes into itself, and because of how it had to fit in the pit. So it was a very unique thing, very difficult, but people love it, and it does breathe fire. I watched the Munsters when I was a kid. That was one of the inspirations of my life. They had a fire-breathing dragon that lived under the stairs named Spot. And I always wanted a fire-breathing dragon, and I got to build my own fire-breathing dragon. So that's another one, kind of like the Haunted Mansion story. I've been very blessed in my life because I've gone through things that I have experienced as a child, and then they came true. You know what I mean?
That fire-breathing is incredible. How many different... First of all, where did you test it? And second of all, how many different fire tests did you do?
It's interesting that you should mention that. We had a fire test out in the back of our shop, and our neighbors were very, you could see over the fence, the neighbors. And one of the first times we tested it, we put the dragon's head on a forklift. We put it way up in the air like it was going to be. And just for fun, some of my employees took a stick and stuck it in the ground and put a bunch of wieners and marshmallows on it. And we activated the thing, and this giant fireball came out, and all the wieners and marshmallows just turned totally black. But it was kind of fun to watch it. And the neighbors were like, what the hell are you guys doing over there? There's this dragon head spitting flame fireballs up into the air, and it's like, you guys are nuts. And cars would park out in front, everything. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask a question I know you can't answer, but are you building a second one for Florida? Because that would be really nice.
Well, we're building a lot of things right now for the largest parks in the world, but that's all I can say.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. NDAs nonstop for you, I'm sure. Let's talk a minute about the Little Mermaid dark rides, because those, gosh, talking about a classic. In fact, we're looking at an Ariel statue right now as we sit here talking, but that's such a classic property that took a long time to get a dark ride. And you did a bunch of different figures. I want to talk about Sebastian, because in a lot of the Sebastian figures, he has animated eyes in the sense that they're projected. At that point, was that the smallest figure that had because it's an interior projection, right? Was that the smallest figure you'd done at that point? And then did that take a lot of, figuring out?
That was a challenge. Yeah. There was a lot of effort put into that figure. It was a challenging figure. The head's about the size of a large potato, So, the, projection eye thing and all of that, Disney really developed a lot of that stuff. Mermaid, I have to say, had a great team. Chris Crump, Larry Nicolai. We build the things that people ask us to build and bring to us. And we are, very fortunate to work with people who are, brilliant that have worked, the Disney people that are brilliant Imagineers. But, we like challenges. We've built a lot of equipment that is very challenging and takes, you're going to do what with this thing? Even the fire breathing thing, it's like, you got to breathe a 40-foot flame. It's like, really? It's got to be safe. It's got to be, when we get into a lot of unique characters, one of the original characters I did years ago myself was a unicycle riding character. And that really got me my first theme park jobs.
I think I've seen that at the expo, right? Have you brought that to D23 Expo?
Yeah.
And put it up on a wire over everybody's head? Yeah.
And I've taken it to trade shows and stuff like that. It's called Wendell. You can see it on the internet. If you look up Garner Holt or Garner Holt Productions on YouTube, you can see a whole bunch of our stuff. And Wendell's on there. He's one of the things on there. But I built this character to ride a unicycle. It looks like no visible means of support. And it took me about 2 years to figure out how to do it. And even people like Bob Gurr couldn't figure it out.
Wow.
And finally, after a couple of years, he was over here one day and we were talking about it. And he even said on tape, it's like, I never saw that thing up above, but I don't know how it works. So I took him out and I uncovered it. And I said, look, this is how it works. And I really enjoyed, because he's so brilliant, So I think the thing is being able to do unique, unusual things. It's kind of like a magic trick, all these characters, whether it's Cars or Sebastian or Dragon or anything. It's like a mechanical magic trick. It's like the illusion of life. We're creating the illusion of life, taking plastics and mechanical things and putting it all together. And then you bring people up to look at it and they start crying because they're so excited to see it. And it's like, wow, how can this chunk of plastic get that kind of emotion out of somebody? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really exciting to do that. And we like to do unique things that are magical,
In the case of Sebastian, did somebody, did Imagineering say to you, hey, we want this character to blink its eyes through animation? Or was that something that you were like, hey, we got a cool idea?
They came to us and we collaborated on that. They came to us with an idea. They wanted to do a rear projection, and, they came to us with a concept and we had to work on that and, back and forth until it worked,
Yeah.
And we enjoy that. The people at Imagineering are brilliant. But, so a lot of times in the past, I've sat in meetings with them before even while Attractions is being conceived. Because like with Radiator Springs, they figured we were going to be building some of the cars, and we built 12 of the cars. That's no secret in the Disney world. And, they figured we were going to be building some. So they included us in the meetings. It's like, okay, this is stuff we're going to do. What does everybody think? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And we all kind of collaborate and put our heads together, But, we're just very honored to be able to work with them at any point because it's great. We love the show. We love to bring what we can bring to the show. And we're kind of like Imagineers, but we don't get to call ourselves Imagineers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely want to talk about Cars Land because I think that's one of the most impressive matches as far as what you see on screen is what's in front of you. It's pretty incredible. Those were so large, those figures, that it's kind of the opposite problem of Sebastian. There's no problem figuring out where do I stick a projector or motor, but just kind of the scale and size and probably weight of those things, I would assume are the biggest problems.
Yeah, they weigh almost what real cars can weigh.
Jeez.
So, they have to bounce around and be animated and have, bumpers that form words, that look like they're a mouth. And, the cars aren't actually a real size car. So there's nothing on them that could be real. I mean, it'd be great if you go down and buy a mirror at a junkyard or buy even a curb feeler from, the old cars that had curb feelers on them. You couldn't do that. We had to build everything. We had to, build every piece, every bumper, every taillight. I mean, every part of the car.
Another character of yours I saw that was just unbelievable was at Comic-Con, although I don't think this was officially for Disney, correct me if I'm wrong, but Grogu, who is breaking the internet for so many different reasons. You've created an amazing Grogu figure. How did that come about?
Well, that is a company called EFX, and they do very accurate movie props, like helmets and like Star Wars stuff and everything else. And we knew the gentleman as a friend, and he came to us and said, "We'd like to hire you to build a Grogu," and of course that's a Disney product, and so he had a Disney license. He had a license to build those kind of things, and he made arrangements through Disney that he could build that character, or that he could have that character built. So, through his license, we were allowed to do it. So we built a Grogu, and, he paid us to do a prototype. So we developed this Grogu character, and, it turned out really well, and people were really shocked and amazed by it. And, that's one of the things I was talking about, people bursting into tears with pieces of plastic and metal, at Comic-Con where it premiered. It just crowds around it, just 10 people deep, all the time. And a number of people came up. I was shocked. People would come up in front of it and burst into tears. And they'd be wiping their eyes and they would be looking at it. And the only thing I can figure is that, I'm like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? The only thing that I could figure is that I think that when they got up in front of it, it was kind of like they felt like they were meeting a celebrity. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, somebody would get in front of George Clooney or something and then they would burst into tears. They were acting like they were meeting the celebrity out of the film.
Yeah, I mean, because it's that accurate. I have seen it up close and personal. Like, it is what you see on screen. And I always say that about animatronic figures or even characters in the parks. And I love it when it's an exact replica of what you're seeing on screen. When you meet Kermit the Frog as a puppet, that's what you see on screen. When you meet, Belle in any form, it's not what we're seeing on screen. So it's just a different emotional trigger, I feel like. And I think Grogu did that.
So I was like, wow, this is incredible, and people are going nuts. And it went, had a lot of great things on, on the internet, like you say, kind of jumped out there and thought, wow, that's really cool,
Was there ever a point where you felt like, obviously you have a great love of animatronic figures, I'm a huge fan of them, but was there a point in this industry where you felt like we're going away from that? Things are becoming screen-based, a lot of projection work and attractions. Did you have that fear?
No, well, I'm biased, so we did see the theme park industry head that direction. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, they kind of, they thought, a lot of companies in the theme park business said, oh, wait a minute, we spend a lot of money on maintaining animatronics and all that stuff. Why don't we just get a bunch of 3D glasses and a bunch of 3D screens and make a bunch of 3D films, and everybody comes and sits in a vehicle and goes through an attraction and they see 3D. And it kind of got a lukewarm feeling for a while, and then it kind of backfired in a sense. I mean, a lot of the guests and the guest surveys said no. How can you have a Pirates of the Caribbean, get on a boat and go buy a bunch of screens with glasses on, And, now you go down to Costco and get a 3D TV, so, people see 3D. The way my eyes work, I can't even see 3D. So a lot of people can't, So all of a sudden, everybody went, whoa, this really isn't going to work that well. There's certain places where it works. There's some attractions that are film-based that are fabulous attractions, like soaring, right? That's a film-based attraction that's beautiful. But, how would you like to go to Pirates or Mansion and be a film-based attraction? It'd be ridiculous,
Yeah, I definitely think that the public has made it known. It's about things being tangible, right? I just feel that way even when I see movies. I was talking to you earlier about how I love Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Part of the reason I love it is because all of those special effects are so tangible. And a Marvel film that is so CG heavy doesn't do that for me. So I think there's something about that with animatronics as well.
I agree, totally.
Yeah. Now, was there, obviously you've been working in this industry for a long time, was there a technology that when it came out, when it was discovered, that you were like, whoa, game changer?
Well, it kind of was, computers, really.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of lived through the thing where, I remember when there were no computers. I'm not that old, I'm 60, I'll turn 62 in a month. But, there's a lot of people that remember the day that there were no computers. And now everything we do is computerized. We have figures that we build now that every function in the figure, a figure can have 60 different movements and every function is its own computer. And, they all talk to each other and make the figure work, So, Grogu that you saw, he had 20 something functions, every function, it was its own computerized function and all the computers are all talking together to make it work. So yeah, there's, in the 45 years that I've been doing this, there's been a lot of advances in materials, plastics, technology, motor technology, actuator technology, computer technology, memory storage, audio repeaters being digital. In the old days, everything was on tape. Now that you can't even find tape anymore. You know what I mean? So, it's all advanced in a good way,
What's something that has really stayed and hasn't changed from those many years ago that you're like, this is just kind of a staple of how things are built and it'll always, quote unquote, always be this way? Has skin changed a lot?
Well, we still, silicone skins, we use silicone. We were one of the first to use silicone in the theme park industry. And we were one of the first to use electric motors in the theme park industry, too. Some of the Disney stuff that we did years ago was some of the very first. But the skin technology is something that it's the same but different. It's the materials change a little bit here and there, but it's still the same silicones that we used to use. It's how you color it, how do you intrinsically color it, how to make it last and make it durable and non-tear and all that kind of stuff. So some of the formulas change, but it's very similar.
Have you ever been asked to create an audio animatronic figure of Walt Disney or heard a conversation about that? Really? Mm-hmm. For Disney or for someone else?
I talked to a very close, and I don't want to mention who it is. I talked to a very close family member said to me one time, it's like, I wonder why nobody ever wanted to, make a figure. And I kind of was taken aback. It's kind of like, wow. I'm surprised to hear somebody from the family say this, but I know that the Disney Company has would never, ever, I don't believe they'd ever allow that.
I have such mixed feelings about it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I feel like if it was presented in a very Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln sort of way, I think it could have a huge impact on, talk about crying in front of Grogu, right? I think it would be kind of amazing.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. There's so many legalities about the name and the likeness and the image and this and that and everything else. And it would take somebody that was very, that thought a lot about all the ramifications of that to make a decision to do that. I don't know if you'll ever see it or not.
One of the things that I found interesting on your website is you say no project is too big or too small. Now, you've been...
That's a broad statement, huh?
The thing that kind of amazes me about that statement is you've been doing this for so long that I would assume you can be picky about the type of work you do.
Oh, and we are.
But why would you even consider a small project?
Because it's fun. Well, when we say big or small, it's not just the project. We, for a long time... up until fairly recently, one of the smallest figures we ever built was a sparrow. Okay. Little bird. And I think that you saw out here just a little while ago, you didn't see it actually work. What is now our smallest figure, which is a slug, like a garden slug. And he's, 2 inches long, and it's got a couple of movements, so it's a garden slug that's animated. So, we built some of the biggest figures in the world and some of the smallest figures in the world. We've had people come to us and have unique projects that I just thought to myself, wow, my whole life has been fun, and I've had a lot of enjoyment out of life. And I just, some projects, I've had people come to me with multi-million-dollar projects like, no, I don't want to do that.
Interesting.
It just doesn't turn me on, and it just doesn't feel right, And I've had people come to me with hardly any money and say, I want to do this. And it's like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I'd like to do something like that. You know what I mean? And a lot of people come to me with stuff that I'd never do, the crazy ideas and things that, I can't tell you the number of people that come to me and said that they wanted a girlfriend that was...
I knew you were going to go there. When you said that, I was like, he's talking about sex dolls, isn't he?
Well, somebody went off and made billions of dollars doing that, but... I could have done that 30 years ago, but, I had the chance, and I had a guy offer me $1 million for one time. I didn't even have to think about it. I said, look, if I do something like that, then my dream to work for some of the biggest theme park companies in the world, they're going to look at me and say, you do what?
Yeah.
You're not going to work for us, so why would I endanger that?
Yeah. Now, you touched on it earlier, but I want to wrap things up talking about your Education Through Imagination program, because I think this is so cool. Like, your facility really is set up for tours. You give a lot of tours to school programs and throw charity events and such. When did that all start for you, and kind of how did it come about?
Well, years ago, people would come out here, and everybody liked to see what goes on behind these walls, I mean, even some of the people at Disney used to call this Imagineering East, or Mapo East, the part of Imagineering that was the production part. So we enjoyed, I always enjoyed taking people through and showing people, and then it got to the point where it was kind of burdensome because, everybody wanted to see it, and it was, kind of got tough. And, fast forward 25 years, I always kind of figured out, I've been in this. So this last July, 25th of this last July, is exactly 45 years ago that I came home from the attorney with my mom. She drove me home and said, and I had incorporated Garner Holt Productions as a corporation in California because we wanted some legal protection from the haunted houses that I was doing, that if people would get hurt, that type of thing. So it was actual corporation. I went home, I painted the name on the door. It said Garner Holt Productions Incorporated. That was 45 years ago, this last July 25th. So, when you've been doing stuff that long, you get to, I'll turn 62 in a month. And, you start thinking, well, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to end this all? And I don't want to end it, but if I get to be 80 years old, am I going to still be sitting at a table building birds or something, or designing this or attractions or whatever? But so this education thing kind of popped up. We're touring kids through here, and I started thinking about shop classes, and then I started. A fellow came to me that had been a principal of a school in San Bernardino, and asked me if I would sponsor the school. And he started wanting some animatronics in there and doing a program. So I did, and it started to grow, and it turned into like this maker space for animatronics. And so he came to me one day and said, well, let's talk about this. And basically, in a nutshell, it was like, well, this is an award-winning thing, and it's looking great. People are loving it. Why don't we do this? Why do it just in one school? Why don't we take it to every school? There's 136,000 schools in the country. Let's take this out, and it's kind of a new, unique shop class, which don't exist anymore, which was what my career hinged on. We started to develop a thing called Animaker Space, not a maker space, but an Animaker Space, where you can actually build an animatronic figure in your own classroom, and from raw materials, using machines that we teach how to use. And it teaches kids about robotics, teaches kids about art and combination of art and robotics. It's STEM and STEAM, that you hear all about. And so it makes for a great opportunity for kids to learn. In this building, there's about 50 different career paths that people could choose. Engineering, sculpting, painting, costuming. In an animaker space, you get to learn about a lot of these career paths. And you do virtual tours at the company, you do all this stuff, but you get to build a figure. And hopefully these are the kids that are learning about robots and robotics and animatronics and all the things that they're going to face in the future. And in 5 years, everybody's going to be standing around next to a robot, something. It's either going to be, people are driving around, or they're being driven around by robots. The Tesla's a robot with wheels, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to be standing next to them, working with them. People should be designing them, building them, maintaining them, figuring out how they're used. That's what the kids of today should be learning about right now. So that's what our Animaker Space teaches kids. And we have virtual tours and virtual classes and all kinds of different stuff, and it's expanding very rapidly. So we're really excited about that. So that's what my legacy is going to be. And I'm real happy about that, is that I'm going to be able to turn this company into an educational thing, as well as being supplier, the largest company in the world, really, that does animatronics. Plus, now we're going to turn it into helping kids.
You are Willy Wonka, and you're looking for your Charlie through these classes, I think.
That's an interesting thing.
Somebody's going to get a golden ticket and have a nice little career.
That's an interesting way to put it, but I guess, something like that.
If there is a school that is interested in learning more about this or getting involved, how does that work?
www.garnerholt.com. You can go to our website and then go to Education Through Imagination website through there. Or just look up, Garner Holt Education on the internet. All they need to do is start talking to our people, and we'll show them how they can put an Animaker Space in their school, and how to start training kids and kits, all kinds of fun stuff. And teachers are thrilled about it, because they're seeing kids that didn't want to come to school want to come to school now, because they're so excited about getting to go in this classroom and build figures.
Does it usually come from like an art budget that the school pays for it, or do you know like what department? Schools have a lot of budgets, and they end up with some funds, quite often they don't know what to do with, and they want to do something unique and unusual. Well, this is something unique and unusual that really benefits kids. Because so much is about STEM and STEAM, which is about art and mathematics, engineering, and all that kind of stuff. And you roll all that up into one, and that's really what animatronics is. And so there's a lot of budgets out there for STEM and STEAM right now. So that's awesome. Well, Garner, thank you so much. This has been enlightening. I could talk to you for hours. I won't, because you should get home. But thank you. This has been a blast.
It's been a great pleasure, and I hope your people out there enjoy it. And I hope they all enjoy some of the things we've made in the theme park world out there. So
I can guarantee you they enjoy that.
Yeah, but I enjoyed the talk. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast, on your favorite podcast app. Now, folks, the Halloween parties have already begun at Walt Disney World, and the spooky season is right around the corner. So if you're someone who likes to have a bit of the Disney-inspired spooky in your everyday wardrobe during this season, or if you're someone who doesn't like to go all out with their Halloween costume but still wants to be part of the fun, check out the Halloween collection at Who's It's and What's It's. Of course, all year long, Who's It's and What's It's is creating a deep-cut, magically inspired apparel, but things just got a bit spookier. Click on the Who's It's and What's It's link in this episode's description to see all that they have to offer, and don't forget to use code DCTC at checkout to save 15% off of your entire order. This episode has been executive produced by Robert Scontrino. Gain rewards like Robert, including access to never-before-heard episodes and live-stream Q&As by visiting the Patreon link in this episode's description. And don't forget that I'll be matching 100% of your first month subscription to the charity True Colors United for all new patrons joining this month, August of 2022. Basically, anything you need can be found in this episode's description, from additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.